Today we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. My idea for this show was to invite guests and get the conversation started, to take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. And we encourage our listeners to look within themselves to take decisive action to make a positive difference. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers, and today I am excited to have with me my special guest, Mr. Brandt Ryan. We're going to discuss the topic of impermanence, and it is the understanding that everything must change. And So I was inspired to this topic for a couple of reasons. Very recently, a cousin of mine passed away, and there, the circumstances around that are, kind of mysterious or what have you. But she is no longer with us. But the last time that I spent quality time with her was about 4 years ago, when I was asked to officiate a funeral service for her mother. And what was unique about that experience was that her mother, African-American, her mother was a Buddhist. And that caused a great deal of tension within the family when the daughter, my cousin, suggested that she wanted to honor her mother in the Buddhist tradition. And of course, all the other family members coming from a Christian background pushed back and said, hey, if it's not a Christian, funeral or service, I don't want any part of it. And, a lot of drama behind that. And so I was charged with accepting that challenge, which I willingly and graciously did, because I felt like this was a wonderful opportunity to educate folks who don't understand anything about Buddhism, and to be able to explain that. And so I had the pleasure of having with me a Tibetan Buddhist monk who is the head of the Indianapolis Buddhist temple here in Indianapolis. And he is an actual Tibetan Buddhist monk and has very little English. And so I asked him to join me in performing this funeral service and to stand with me as I worked through this service, which I knew was going to be a bit of a challenge because it was an education point. So being able to point out the teachings of Buddha and being able to point out the teachings of Jesus, and to show you that this universal truths that both of these wonderful people of great wisdom were teaching are consistent, and that's why they are universal truths. And so this idea here exists also here. So and so that was a very important thing. But the one thing that this all centered around was the word and the teaching and the Buddhist principle of impermanence, that everything is in constant state of change. Nothing stays the same. In fact, the Buddha's a lot of the central message of Buddha is that life is suffering, and the suffering is largely due to our unwillingness to let go and to allow things to continue to change. It's when we cling to them that our suffering begins and our struggles begin, because we want things to stay the same, and they just won't. They do not stay the same. They're in constant change, constant transformation. So anyway, so I'm excited to get into this topic today. And there is a song that is a favorite of mine that is called Everything Must Change. And I would like to recite these lyrics because it gives us in a lyric and poetic context, a really good idea of the concept of impermanence and how these lyrics explore a wide space here. And so the lyrics read as, everything must change, nothing stays the same. Everyone must change, nothing stays the same. The young become the old, mysteries do unfold. Because that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. There are not many things in life that you can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds and sun lights up the sky and hummingbirds do fly. Winter turns to spring. A wounded heart will heal. Never much too soon. Everything must change. The young become the old. Mysteries do unfold. Because that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. There are not many things in life that you can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds do fly. I have always been in love with this song because of these wonderful lyrics and this and the beauty in the idea, the beauty in this, in the melody, the beauty in the idea of these words, which deliver I guess to some a very harsh truth that everything changes. And I guess it may go down a little bit better when you put music to it or something, but that has always been a very attractive song to me, one of my favorites of all time. So as we talk about impermanence, I bring this story again. I was reminded about the concept of impermanence because of the funeral service that I performed for my cousin's mom, my aunt, about 4 years ago. And unfortunately, I'm now facing the death of my cousin herself. And I will be performing her funeral service soon when she is returned back to Indianapolis, Indiana. And she will be laid in her final resting place along with her mother. And I will revisit this idea of impermanence in her service as well. And so that's where the idea came from, but also just what a great idea and what a great concept and something that is worthy of committing the time in exploring in the context of a show. So I'm glad to be doing that today with my friend Brandt Ryan. And I want to tell you a little bit about Brandt before we get going. And Brandt is, hold on just a second. Brandt is sitting right here, but now Brandt is witnessing my inability to work a mouse. So Brandt Ryan, after obtaining a BA in philosophy from Marian University, Brandt Ryan earned an MFA in creative writing from Florida International University in 2001. While living in New York, he served as an editorial assistant for Zoetrope, All Story, Francis Ford Coppola's internationally acclaimed fiction and art magazine. He currently resides here in his hometown of Indianapolis, Indiana, where he recently wrote and directed his first play entitled Restitution. So I would like to welcome Brandt to the show. Welcome, Brandt.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to share this space with you today and to explore this concept of impermanence. And as I was also thinking about the show beyond just the scope of my own personal experience, I'm reminded that over the past year, we've experienced, great changes. I mean, great change has happened at every turn, from our political leadership to our racial awareness, to life on lockdown and quarantine during a global pandemic, to the loss of loved ones and friends who are no longer with us today. I mean, it's while all this may seem unusual, it's actually normal that change happens and that it's continuously and constantly in motion. So again, this concept of impermanence, I'm just excited about addressing that. As I was talking to Kim, producer, just before we started the show, I mean, the whole idea over the last year or two has been I think the idea of impermanence is because the topics have been so large and huge that we can see those changes from, our political climate or pandemic, wearing masks, being locked down in the house, or being able to go out and have dinner or not. I mean, so the changes have been so drastic, I think we notice it. But the key is to be able to understand that impermanence is forever with us. And even the small stuff, I mean, even being able to, brush my hair today and glance down at the sink and look at the 50 hairs that are there that I am minus, you know what I mean, as a result of that. So, I mean, it's the little things, but little things mean a lot because they're in constant motion and they accumulate. And so at some point, there probably won't be any hair. I mean, so, I mean, that's just how it's happening, but so your thoughts, I mean, just before we get too deep into this, but your thoughts on this topic of impermanence, your initial thoughts here.
Yeah, well, I agree with you that it's sort of been, highlighted over the past few years, where you've got a bunch of like very drastic changes that people are they're sort of forced to see these changes. Mm-hmm. Whereas the smaller things sometimes we don't become aware of, but those can be things that lead, to important changes in my experience. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I always say, back to my education, I think of Heraclitus and you never step into the same river twice thing. Mm-hmm. And then, but after we discussed it a little bit, I thought, I think the idea is more like you need to be in the river. Mm. There is no shore that doesn't change. Yeah. Where the Western idea with Heraclitus, stepping into one and then stepping out, as opposed to like the more Eastern, you're in the river and your ability to accept change and move with it, is probably related to your well-being. Mm-hmm.
I agree. Oh, certainly. Because I mean, that again, the idea that we struggle with change, it's like, we know things must change, but then we resist every time we attempt to make a change. Then it's like, I'm uncomfortable. Why are you uncomfortable? Because it's different. Okay, but it's got to be different in order to change, right? I mean, but that's scary. Why is it scary? Why do you think that's scary? Why should it be scary?
Well, again, speaking for myself, changes of a more personal growth is sort of changes that I've been lucky enough to go through. I had to look at some things that I didn't want to look at, whether I was conscious of it or not. There was a long period of time where there were some things that I just didn't want, maybe someone would mention something and sort of you get the truth shoved in your face, but you still have that defense mechanism of, okay, I'm not, I've buried that and it's down there and I'm not dealing with that. Mm-hmm. And so there's fear. There's a lot of fear of facing things, at least on a personal level. And I guess also on a larger level in society in general, some of the things that are happening now, fear of having to look at the truth, dead on, and be able to be open and willing to have tough conversations about yourself, with other people about these things. It's uncomfortable. And everyone wants, like you said, to cling on to that stuff that is comfortable, but you have to accept that uncomfortableness in order to change. And I just think it's necessary that we go through that. And then you end up growing, ends up being a good thing. But the work of getting through the change and facing down those truths that you might be ignoring or I might be ignoring, those have been the most difficult, but the most rewarding having gone through it. It wasn't easy by any stretch. One of the hardest things I've ever done. And it's not like I've perfected, it's progress. So it's a new thing every day. Mm-hmm. So I think people, it's fear. It's fear of having to look at something you don't want to look at. And it's fear of having to go through the hard work of, once you're aware of it, how do I fix this?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, that's a good start. It's a good start. I appreciate you sharing all of that. And I want to get a little bit deeper into the details of what you your experience and you know what you are alluding to there, because I think it's very important. And you know, but yeah, it's healthy. But I guess what perplexes me is whatever made us think that change was ever comfortable. I mean, what day did we wake up and go, oh, you know, I'm cool with it? You know, I mean, in other words, I think we're always meant to be kind of off balance with it, you know, in order to be able to flow or to swim through and roll with the tides, you know what I mean? And to be that agile, you know what I mean? I think it's the rigidity part. We're starting to tighten up, we're clinging, that we start to pull muscles and hurt ourselves and everything else. But anyway, very interesting. Well, I'm grateful that you're here today joining me, and you are listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we are discussing impermanence today with my guest, Brandt Ryan. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talents, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, billmyersinspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we're discussing impermanence. Everything must change with my guest, Brandt Ryan. Brandt, welcome again.
Thank you.
I want to open this up with just a couple of quotes that I'm inspired to share here. One is from Thich Nhat Hanh, and he reminds us, it is not impermanence that makes us suffer. What makes us suffer is wanting things to be permanent when they are not. And then he offers this other little piece, which I really like, and then I think this we can get into you sharing a little bit more. And it says, thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. Thanks to impermanence, everything is possible.
Like that.
Yeah. Okay. So you were about to share some with me and with our listeners. You were just getting ready to cite some examples in your own life experience of examples of impermanence and examples of growth in your walk. I would love to hear it.
Okay. Well, the first major, I mean, of course, again, back to it's been going on the whole time.
Sure.
But I guess one of the first events, I was diagnosed with Tourette's when I was 9. And there was there wasn't a lot of awareness about it back then. And I had to deal with sort of being the class clown to, oh, that's an actual disease. And like the nuns were doing one thing to me before, and I was getting the all-time record for detentions. And then it was like, ooh, hands off, sort of opposite situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that, as a child, and you're trying to fit in, that was a big change that happened to me. Just the diagnosis, it's not like the Tourette's got better or worse, but just the diagnosis itself changed everyone's perspective on what that is. But moving forward a bit, I also had a certain relationship with Catholicism. I went to Catholic schools most of my life. And then I ended up going to Marian, which is a Catholic school, and studying, philosophy and a little theology. But after that, I had a number of people, close people, pass away in a pretty, short span of time. And I sort of tossed everything out the window. And because I didn't want to address, because that was permanent to me. It got, those deaths, and I couldn't see the possibility that it could be any other way. So I had some blinders on, but I ended up getting into a recovery program, a 12-step program that was able to. It was a miracle. It was able to turn my viewpoint around to be able to recognize again my relationship with God, to reestablish that. But a lot of things happened before that, without which I would have never walked into those rooms to begin with. And it was a lot of pain and suffering, and turmoil, and everything that goes along with that. But now I can almost say that I can say I'm grateful that I went through that, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to reestablish a relationship. God was there the whole time. It was the same when I didn't realize that God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. So that was a big change. And when you're new in that, you start to get some really hard questions thrown at you that sort of separates the people that are serious about it and the people that aren't. And I was desperate and willing to do anything they told me to do to get better. And that included, looking at some things in my past that I didn't want to look at, looking at truths about myself that I didn't want to look at. And one day I had I came to this realization that I had basically been selfish my entire life. Like that was my MO. And when I really saw that, because I heard other people talking about it, and I said, that's me. So it was through storytelling, through other people talking about it, that I was able to recognize this in myself. And it hit me hard, and it was overwhelming. But I did the work that was required to address those things. And it wasn't my MO of act like, no, hold on to that old, just shove it down somewhere deep and forget about it. Like that was not going to work. I had to change. And in order to change, I had to do a number of things that were very difficult. And it's not like it's perfect now. Mm-hmm. It's just like baby steps. But it allowed me to be aware, which was like the first thing, mm-hmm. And then work on it from there. So I guess those are a couple examples anyway.
Yeah, no, it's that's something. So being able to understand where the suffering, and what it is that's causing that, and being able to then address it, having a path or a means or encouragement to be able to let go of that thing, not stuff it in the back, but just let go of it entirely, right? I think that's wonderful, and I'm glad that you are able to share that, and I'm glad that you found the necessary support and to be able to do that. I mean, a lot of people are still searching for that, whatever that is, and I certainly encourage them to continue searching for that and be and to find the assistance, you know, whatever the issue is again. And I think that's wonderful. So I'm having an issue with my mouse here, but come on, mouse. I seem to be stuck, but you know what? I don't need a mouse right now. Okay, so what I wanted to do was, as you were saying that, I was reminded of, again, the second quote that I shared from Thich Nhat Hanh, which was this notion of, thanks to impermanence, because it doesn't last forever, everything is possible. Because it's this too shall pass, it makes it possible that on the other side of that, you know, on the other side of the cloud, the sun is shining. You know what I mean? It's because that cloud's moving. You know, so we don't want to cling to the cloud. We don't want to stay in that mode of being held captive to the thing. We need to be able to flow. So I think that's really, really awesome. In this, I want to share a couple of more of these quotes, and then we'll continue this conversation, because I'm fascinated by some of these different observations that have come to us from various, you know, thinkers and writers and stuff like that. And this is from Somerset Maugham, which I've always enjoyed his work, but he says, nothing in the world is permanent, and we're foolish when we ask anything to last. But surely we're still more foolish not to take delight in it while we have it. And that's interesting, because I think we get the preoccupation about the thing to that it lasts, that we don't even appreciate it when it's present.
Yes.
Does that make sense? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. I think that like staying in the moment has a lot to do with to this whole theme. Yes,
I agree. Being able to appreciate the moment that you are in and stop looking at 5 minutes from now, but what about right now? You know, we squander right now trying to predict tomorrow. It's like, yeah, but what about right now? What about today?
Or trying to live back.
Yeah, or trying to, you know, yeah, exactly. So I think that these, you know, again, some of these little reflections, you know, the value of these comments. Here's another one from William Braxton Irvin. By contemplating the impermanence of everything in the world, we are forced to recognize that every time we do something could be the last time we do it. And this recognition can invest the things we do with a significance and intensity that would otherwise be absent. We will no longer sleepwalk through life. You know, to live fully in a manner that each time you do something, you put the level of energy and seriousness to it that this is or could be the last time I ever do this. That's, you know, that brings it all the way home. I mean, that really, that grounds it. And these are many of the thoughts that I have to hold as a, you know, in performance and things like that, because that really is kind of the truth. I mean, I only got one opportunity to get it right, and it's right now.
Mm. Yes.
And whatever comes out, it was right for right now. Mistakes and all, it was right for right now, as long as I was fully into that moment, you know.
Engaged. Yeah, that reminds me of that little story in Dostoevsky where he talks about a man that's about to be sentenced to death, and he's like 5 minutes out from being hung. And he the last minute, he's like, okay, I'm going to cut this last minute into 20 seconds of thinking about my family, 20 seconds of thinking about the things that I've done, and 20 seconds, I'm just going to look around. And this last minute, as if it were it was his last minute, every blade of grass, every sound, it ended up turning into an eternity of time for this person. And then it was really Dostoevsky himself. He had been reprieved at the very last moment. And that's always struck me as, boy, like, if only I could live every moment like it were my last, like that. I couldn't. It's an ideal to shoot for, but I don't. I'm hoping that a gun or something's not in my head in order to do it. Like in Fight Club. Like, what do you want to do? You're going to be a dentist, and you're going to go be a dentist.
Right. Well, sometimes it bees that way, but unfortunately. But oh man. So we are here talking about impermanence today. Everything must change with my guest, Brandt Ryan, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talent, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, billmyersinspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and today we are discussing impermanence. Everything must change with my friend Brandt Ryan. And I was complaining about my mouse just a minute ago, and yet another perfect example of impermanence. I thought maybe it just lost the Bluetooth connection, but actually, I think the battery itself is dead. Now, I did not plan for that to happen during the show, but yet again, I cannot find myself tethered to this mouse, and there it goes, because I must be free of this mouse now. Isn't that wonderful, Kim? Did you like that?
I did.
Hey, how about that? I'm like free of the mouse. I don't need a mouse. It's holding me back. But I do want to share one more quote on impermanence, because accept the things I cannot change. Thank you, Kim, for that reminder. I appreciate it. So, but here's another quote that I am really fascinated by, and I must share it regarding impermanence. And it simply says, "Our lives are written in disappearing ink." Now, if that's not a reminder, I don't know what is. So, Brandt, so how do we look at impermanence when we sort of broaden that view into social sphere? For instance, we have just Well, you've just recently become familiar with the podcast. Well, Bill Myers Inspires. We've discussed some of that, and I know that you've had a chance to listen to some of the shows. And so much of what's been going on in the last year, George Floyd related stuff, so race relations and all that. And so, I know that it requires, that the concerns as it relates to social concerns of as far as racism in America and so on and so forth, which I have been just trying to really do as much as I can, with the podcast to really explore that and to try to have discussions on that. And I know that you've recently sort of taken an interest to sort of tune into some of that and listen. And so, how important, because that's an issue of impermanence too, because if an individual has been, I'm American citizen, whatever, I think it's really relegated to just America, because clearly when the issue of George Floyd exploded, it hit throughout the world. It resonated like all over the place. And it went past, again, just the idea of police brutality and the killing of innocent or unarmed Black folks and all that. It really went to the treatment of Black people historically. It really went to a very, very deep place. So in the midst of all of that and critical race theory and all these sorts of things that are attempting to bring the truth, the other part, the untold part of the history into, to give a full picture so that it really is the complete history, as opposed to whitewashed and censored stuff, white hero stuff. So anyway, as I look at all that, I know that you have been, again, sort of really recently, sort of looking at all these things, and particularly the shows. And so I'm curious, how does the concept of impermanence, when you have had, and many of us have had a certain idea, a fixed idea of America and what it is, or race relations, some understanding, and then suddenly there's information that is starting to surface that was not included in the textbooks that we took, was not included in the narratives that we were taught, not included in the TV programs that we watch. So it's like, it is a little startling in some ways, even for myself, for the information that has been uncovered, particularly even in the podcast. I've been in a lot of wow places. Wow. I've said that 1,000 times, because folks are sharing information I've never heard before, because it was not in these textbooks. I did not, major in African-American studies or anything. No, I didn't. My African-American studies has been through the experience of being around African-Americans and African-Americans in my family, and being part African-American myself. That's I don't know what, I got to study in it, but, but through those observations, but I have learned a lot. Again, 5-10 years ago, I'd never heard of the Tulsa riots. I didn't have a clue about that, but nobody else did either. So all this stuff now is starting to come in. How do you think that factors in your processing of again, just the race dynamic, as far as the stories that have been told? I don't know. I'm just curious if there is a spin to be had. If it happens to us on our own personal, do we have personal epiphanies where we're going, wait a minute. Do we bring into question these things that we thought we had answered, that they were fixed, the narrative was fixed? Is it possible that it never was fixed, and it was, a false narrative that we bought? Now we're like learning, man, that's not. I'm just curious what your thought is, because I wrestle with that. I'm still, myself, I'm still processing myself, but I'm just curious what, in your experience, how that is resonating.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for the podcast that you this whole show, because I've learned so much from it, particularly on this issue. Again,
thank you.
And a disclaimer, I'm with this issue. It's like I was on the Titanic, and I just sort of saw this little tip of an iceberg, but then steer away from that, because I'm trying to hold on to my previous idea that I'm nice and comfy with, but I crashed into that thing, and I'm like right now in the middle of it, and a little bit overwhelmed and lost, but but learning so much. So I'm so grateful. But so in as much as my experience on this would be valuable, it was another one of, it wasn't a lightning bolt. It was in another space, we call it. It was a recognition of something in an educational process, not at a school, but sort of like the School of Hard Knocks, where, with back to the philosophy degree, I learned about, I read Nicomachean Ethics, and pretty much the whole thing was about ethics and learning that, these very high and separated from reality truths about, every substance, every species being equal in color and weight, and all of this is just accidental, and you need to treat things according to what they are, not these accidents that are color and height and your DNA and what you're predisposed. None of that. That's a human being. We're all human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a racist. I don't. I know what a right is. I studied what a right is. I can tell you the basis for all of this. And not only was I satisfied with that at the time, but it's almost like it was a point of pride or something. And then, I, again, through storytelling, through your podcast and listening to other people, because I didn't get it, before a month ago, I still had that position. And I started hearing these stories coming from other people, and that, again, because it's so ingrained in the way that we've been brought up and everything, that's a hard one to punch. The awareness part is way more difficult than anything that I've ever sort of had any sort of growth in at all. And I just the stories that were told hit, opened up just a pinhole that I could, I was like, something really affected me, where talking about that someone was walking down a different street and breathing different air. And that day, I was in a coffee shop, and I put myself in a position where I was like, okay, if I were someone of color, what would I be noticing in here? What would I mean, I have no idea where am I even getting this from, but I did pick up a few things, and I was like, that's odd. And so I started thinking about it, and then it got it really heavy, and I had to. It's like there was an epiphany, and again, with any major change, there's some side. I had to step back for a couple of days and be like, well, what just, it was like a whole new world opened up to me. And again, I don't have a wide angle lens on this world. I'm like I've got the fighter pilot's little straw view. I'm just getting to know this stuff, but it's possible though, because it changed. I immediately became humble and got that pride of, oh no, I know what a right is. And, I've dated women of color, and I pulled out all those cards, all of them, and thought I was secure in that. But hearing other people's experiences, particularly from your podcast, has caused me to look at things differently. And it's a little bit overwhelming at the moment, because it's a lot of hard truths. And these weren't tucked away by me. It's like I came into the world with these things tucked away. And it's like, how do I even get to the box where that got tucked into? Where's the key to that box? And the key was another human being telling a story that I could relate to. And that opened that, so that I think now that I'm aware, I ask, what can I do about it? Or do I have anything to do about it? And I listened to another one, and I was like, I see some problems in myself here as I relate to this, and there's going to be some changes that I'm going to have to go through, and they're going to be painful. But again, any milestone I've ever made with any personal growth has been hard work, and this is a big one. It's a really big one for me, and I'm just grateful that I'm aware of it. And so now, because you have to be aware of it first.
Right.
And then maybe now I can take some action in the right direction. But again, I'm at the beginning of that process, and I'm just going to work towards being better at it and seeing things differently. And yeah.
Yeah, that's, it's interesting. And as I listen to you, and I'm certainly, you're remarking about the show, but I have to share the space with you because a lot of this information and stuff that has been unearthed, I never heard it before either. So I'm still processing it. I'm still trying to put it in its proper context. It's not like there was, large groups of people that were privy to the secret data. You know what I mean? It wasn't, dude. I mean, this stuff literally has just sort of come out. So again, I know the same George Washington story you do. I know the same Abe Lincoln story you do. Again, and that's the thing that's really freaking me out too, is that the challenge of being able to, wrestle with this information and then make the adjustments with it. So I don't really have, and would arguably say, nobody, just because you are a person of color, there still wasn't another history book and another story you got. A lot of this information has been sort of hidden, tucked away from all of us. I mean, everybody. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because that's important, because I'm in the process of still growing and learning and being uncomfortable about this stuff too. So anyway, I just wanted to say you're not alone, man.
I appreciate that.
So I want to take a break right now. And you're listening to Bill Myers Inspires with my guest, Brandt Ryan, and we are discussing impermanence. Everything must change. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talents, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, billmyersinspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation.
We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we're talking about impermanence today. Everything must change with my guest, Brandt Ryan, and I would like to offer this up. The word impermanence is derived from two Latin words, im, meaning not, and permanens, meaning permanent. Impermanence is an ism and therefore a belief. In this context, understanding impermanence means understanding that everything is impermanent. So life is impermanent. Nothing stays the same forever. Our thoughts fluctuate and our emotions are always changing. What we consider good or bad is not constant. Our tastes change, our relationships change, our bodies change, our health changes. So once again, just trying to figure out how we become better able to dance through the changes. as opposed to stumble and get knocked over and get skinned knees. I mean, I think it's, being able to sway with the wind when we're in the flow, because it's meant to flow. It's not meant to, you know what I mean? To stand against the thing. It's meant to flow, and so anyway, that's the goal is so how do we flow? And so as I think about, again, all this information, even when we're talking about racism, we're talking about, new discoveries, new information, new ideas, all of these things are something that we all, universally have to wrestle with and start to bring into that reality, because many of these things are acceptances of even what we thought the past was. It wasn't. And so we have to not only do the homework backward and do some editing to the narrative that was false, that we bought into, but suddenly realize that was at best only 50% of that narrative. There's this whole other discovery, this whole other history, this whole other contribution to the world that was largely discredited, get credit given somewhere where it did not belong. That's part of the sort of greed, colonialism, acquisition piece. Yours is not yours. It's mine. I discovered it. It's like, wait a minute, I own it. I own you. What, all these kinds of things. So to be able to bring value back to the individual, bring value back to the culture, bring value, and then appreciation, in the midst of this thing. So even our previous understanding of the history of all of this falls under impermanence, because it is not true, and we're finding out it wasn't. So it was as flimsy as the paper it was written on. We're still in search and seeking the truth. Still, we're truth seekers. I am. I keep asking the questions going on. I don't know if I'm getting any closer or if I'm just sort of, doing a donut at the end of the block, but at least I'm trying. I keep clawing at it and wanting to continue to challenge myself to grow, which is, so I'm frequently uncomfortable. But again, the beautiful thing about this platform or the inquiry is the idea of, let's go after the uncomfortable conversation. Let's just identify and say, hey, that's some shit I don't want to talk about. Let's talk about that, right? Let's go there. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, those are the ones the most important. Those are always the most important ones. The ones that, I'm taking that one to the grave, or this secret, or something that, maybe you should talk about and let out that like when I was talking about my own personal development, some things I need to see about myself. I was like, well, yeah, I'm gonna talk about all those, but not this one thing. That's going to the grave. I can't be open, willing, and honest about that right now. Maybe later. And of course, that is the most important one, because it's the one I'm trying to hide and I'm holding on to so tight for some reason. Yeah, it's just being willing to, you have to be willing, you have to be open, and you have to be honest, and you have to want it. And we've got so many things out there that are stopping us or telling us or scaring us so that they don't want your head to turn that way. Or, they want, it's all about it goes back to the comfort and the avoidance of fear. But if it's found that there's a major problem that requires, on a global or societal level,
right,
that's really going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Right.
That's going to be a tough one, but it has to happen. And how can it happen without individuals, starting to do it, to form groups? Yeah,
that's exactly it. And I'm glad, man, that you are speaking to this, and I'm glad. Thank you for spending your afternoon right here with us at Bill Myers Inspires. Remember, we're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Inspired Choices Network. Remember to take time this week
to take a breath and look within yourself and figure out how you can make a positive difference in this world. Spread the word, and we'll see you here next Friday. Have a wonderful week.